Chapter 92 of Married Thrice to Salted Fish. Shu Junyan rushed to the palace, thinking that something earth-shattering must have happened. Unexpectedly, the entire Xian palace was in a flurry just because little King Huai smiled at the beautiful imperial physician who fed him oranges. Shu Junyan opened Shaoli's eyelids, looked at it repeatedly, and then gave Lin Qingyu a meaningful look. The Empress Dowager urged, "National teacher, Lear has grown, and except for crying when he was just born, he has shown no expression since. Now, with this smile, does it mean that his missing soul illness is getting better?" Shu Junyan murmured, "Not necessarily." Not necessarily meant that it was possible. The Empress Dowager couldn't restrain her eyes from turning red, and she said, voice trembling, "So, there is still hope for Lear's illness to be cured?" Although the prince's soul has left his body, wisps of his soul still remain to ensure that the body continues living. As a remnant of the soul, it is normal for it to cry and smile. This does not explain anything. The Empress Dowager would not give up and said, "But Lear has never smiled before. Why would he smile all of a sudden?" Shu Junyan asked Xiajia Momo, "You said just now that His Highness smiled at Imperial Physician Lin?" Xiajia Momo nodded non-stop. Imperial Physician Lin fed His Highness a piece of orange, and His Highness smiled. "That must be it." Shu Junyan smiled and said, "The prince can see, and he saw the beauty feeding him, and then he was happy. He smiled." Xiajia Momo said, "But the prince never smiled even when he saw other beauties." "That's probably because the other beauties weren't beautiful enough." Lin Qingyu said calmly, "I'm already a married man. I am someone's wife. For the national teacher to refer to me only as a beauty makes light of my identity." Shu Junyan made a bow and said, "I was negligent, and I apologize to the general's wife." Greater hope brings greater disappointment. The Empress Dowager caressed Shaoli's face. Choked up, she said, "Lear, you should also smile at your mother." The Empress Dowager treated him with such sincerity, but Shaoli didn't even want to look at her. The boy had his long, distant lashes hanging down. He was quietly playing with his fingers. Even Shu Junyan couldn't help but be moved by the situation. He said, attempting to bring comfort, "Days and months, years upon years, the world is ever changing. The prince's soul may yet return to his body in the future. Since the prince shows a liking for the general's wife, let the madam come to Xian Palace often to accompany the prince. The future is unpredictable, and I hope the Empress Dowager can rest at ease. Taking care of your phoenix body is most important." When all was said and done, the Empress Dowager was someone who had weathered countless storms. Her qualities had been tempered by palace politics for many years, and only her son and her nephew could make her lose her composure. She made up her mind, wiped away the tears from her eyes, and said, "I have troubled the national teacher to make this visit." She looked at the sky outside the window. "It's less than an hour before sunset. Now that you are here, why not stay for the night in the palace? Accompany His Majesty and Ajia to climb the tower and see the lanterns." Shu Junyan responded with a smile. "This minister gladly obeys." Once the night fell, Xiaojie, the Empress Dowager, and many of the imperial clan climbed up the tower together. The Empress Dowager was at the head of the column, supported by Shao Jie. Seeing Shao Jie's rather unnatural expression and awkward movements, one could easily tell whether his display of filial piety was sincere or not. Standing behind them were several old kings and princesses, as well as Shao Li led by Xiaojia Momo. Lin Qingyu and Shu Junyan stood at the end. Amongst the many people here, only the two of them were not related to the emperor. The imperial palace tower was the highest in the capital and was thus the most suitable place for viewing the lanterns. Looking from that vantage point, you had a panoramic view of the magnificent scenery of the capital. Trees lit as though afire and flowers shining like silver. Parade floats traveled the streets and crowds thronged throughout. It was much like it was the year before. The moon and the lanterns remained the same, but the person from the year past was nowhere to be seen. Appreciating the lanterns at the very best spot, oh, but who to tell it to? Xiaojia Momo's voice came from not far away. My lord, look, that lantern is made in the shape of a rabbit. A few steps away from Lin Qingyu, a young man with but a remnant of his soul was standing high above the city, his eyes reflecting the same bright lights reflected in Lin Qingyu's. The Empress Dowager was in no mood to admire the lanterns, and after watching it for an hour, she said, Ajia is exhausted. I shall be going ahead with Lear back to the palace to rest. It is so rare for the whole family to get together. Your Majesty, you should stay and chat with your noble uncles. Shao Jie replied in assent. Lin Qingyu took the opportunity to retire as well. The Empress Dowager said, Let Imperial Physician Lin escort Ajia back to Xi'an Palace. Saying so, she raised her hand. Lin Qingyu paused, stepped forward, and asked the Empress Dowager to put her hand on his arm. The two were about to head down when Shirong suddenly stood up. He lifted his robes and knelt down, saying loudly, This servant, silly supervisor, Shirong, I am here to plead for forgiveness for the Empress Dowager and Imperial Physician Lin. With his loud delivery, all the nobles' attention was drawn to them. Lin Qingyu and the Empress Dowager looked at each other. The Empress Dowager said sharply, What nonsense are you doing? Are you deliberately spoiling the enjoyment of His Majesty and the assembled nobility? No, Empress Dowager, Shao Jie said nervously. Aurang wishes to sincerely apologize, and I ask that you listen to him first. The Emperor himself having spoken, naturally, the Empress Dowager couldn't humiliate him in front of the clan. It seems that the Emperor knew of your crime in advance. Well, let's hear it. Shirong cut on and said, On that day, Yongliang fell and the northwest was in turmoil. No one in the court, save for General Gu, was qualified to serve as commander of the Shangxi army. However, General Gu refused to take command. It was this servant who offered advice to the Emperor and Prime Minister Xue to deliberately anger General Wu and fuel General Gu's fighting spirit, make him regain his glory, show the vigor that trod the Shishya underfoot, and save the people of Yongliang from disaster. For the sake of the Northwest and for the Dayu, I had no choice but to make such an unwise move. This servant is willing to accept punishment. Before the Empress Dowager could say anything, Shao Jie said again, Imperial Mother, although Aurang did something wrong, he did so with the Northwest in mind. The Shishya threatened to massacre the city if we didn't send General Gu. Aurang really only did it because there was no other way. One old king said, I too have heard something of what had happened that day. General Gu was the commander personally appointed by the late emperor. Despite turmoil in the northwest, he was standing back, unconcerned, and letting matters rest. In my opinion, His Majesty should have issued a decree ordering him to go. Why so much concern on his wishes? The emperor has already spared General Gu's face by going about things this way. Another king agreed. Third brother is right. After all, it is all for the sake of the Dayu. Even if the eunuch is guilty, the merits and demerits of this matter have balanced each other. Shirang looked at Lin Qingyu from out of the corner of his eye. The beautiful imperial physician was also looking at him quietly. His expression seemed calm, but he knew Lin Qingyu wanted his life. The Empress Dowager's chest rose and fell slightly. She tried her best to hide her anger and said with a sneer, "Since the two kings have pleaded for you, Ajia has no choice but to deal with you leniently. Drag him away, give him 30 lashes." Shaojie's eyes widened. 30? Why? The Empress Dowager said coolly. Does the Emperor think it is too much? Shirong called, "Your Majesty," in a low voice, and Shaojie pursed his lips tightly, saying nothing more. Anyone, though, could see that he was dying of distress. Lin Qingyu couldn't help thinking, if Shirong died in front of him, what kind of funny expression would Shaojie have? He wanted to see it. Ah, this freaking bastard. Shirang, oh, I cannot wait for him to die. The audacity to poke a bear and be like, yeah, come at me, dude. I know you want to kill me, but you won't. Oh, the audacity. Back in Xi'an Palace, the Empress Dowager asked Xia Momo to take Shaoli back to his room to rest, and then dismissed everyone. She said angrily, "That was a good trick. The thief crying thief first. Ajia has underestimated that eunuch. I never expected the Emperor to actually protect him to that extent." Lin Qingyu said, "Unfortunately, the time has not yet come to touch Shirang." "Why?" Lin Qingyu explained. "Before the general regains the northwest, there must be no changes within the capital. We have to at least wait until the general regains Yangliang to stabilize the situation in the northwest before we can make a move." Since he stayed behind in the capital, he had to ensure that the Shishya did not have any chance to disturb the morale of the army, so that the soldiers could fight on the battlefield without any worries. "Ajia does not understand," the Empress Dowager said coldly. "Granted, Shirong is a somewhat clever eunuch, but how can killing him cause changes in the capital? Is it possible that the Emperor would risk his position on the throne for the sake of matters between me and him?" Lin Qingyu said, "If I were to say that Shirong is to the Emperor what the little prince is to you, will you understand?" The Empress Dowager was stunned. Of course, she understood that Shaoli was her life. In order to be reunited with Shaoli, she had even betrayed her emperor and her husband. If anyone were to kill Shaoli, she would have the murderer and his entire clan buried alive with him, and then she would go below to the Nine Springs to accompany Lear. But how could that be? Even if the two had a close childhood friendship, it should not result in something like this. Lin Qingyu told the Empress Dowager about Shirang's life experience. After hearing this, the Empress Dowager's expression became more severe, and she resolutely said, "If he really is the Emperor's half-brother, then all the more reason we cannot let him remain." At this moment, the war in the northwest should come first in everything. Lin Qingyu still said the same thing. We will talk about the rest once Yang Liang has been recovered. The Empress Dowager asked, how are you not afraid that he will move against us first? Lin Qingyu laughed. He won't. He wouldn't dare. If something were to happen to him in the capital, it might not be Shixia, the 300,000 soldiers under Gu Fuzhao's command would kill. Shirong was also waiting. Once Gu Fuzhao pacifies the northwest for him, he will look for an opportunity, hiding his strength and biding his time, aiming to take back military power. With Shirong's caution and prudence, he considers thrice each step he makes. He will not touch Lin Qingyu unless he has absolute assurance. Lin Qingyu stayed in the palace until late at night. By the time he left the palace, the lanterns had been extinguished and the crowds were gone. Only the bright moon was left in the sky, the same bright moon shining thousands of miles away in the northwest. Northwest, Guizhou Governor's Mansion. Gu Fuzhao stretched out his hand and asked Hu Ji to examine his pulse. Seeing the seriousness on Hu Ji's face, he couldn't help sighing. Is there no cure for my disease? Hu Ji said, embarrassed. When people reach middle age, they often suffer from hair loss, especially men. The general's hair loss is not a serious matter. I lose more than you. You really worry too much. No, I really feel like I have lost half the hair on my head though, Gu Fuzhao said in a deep voice. Imperial physician Hu, you must find a way to cure me. If my hair keeps falling at this rate, I will return to see Qingyu with a bald head. Hu Ji had no choice but to say, you should rest more and think less. You might see some improvement. Gu Fuzhao laughed loudly. How is that possible in the current situation? The two were talking when there was a sound of footsteps outside. There were two visitors. One was Shengxi's army vanguard, Wu Yoyan, and the other was Shen Haoshi, the former shadow guard of the Tianji camp. Wu Yoyan and Shen Haoshi were both skilled in martial arts. One was good at fighting head-on, and the other was well versed in the ways of an assassin. After Wu Yuyan learned that Shen Haoshi used to be a shadow guard from the Tianji camp, he often pestered Shen Haoshi to spar with him in his spare time. After a month, he hasn't won once. General, we are back. Hearing Wu Yuyan's voice, Gu Fuzhao didn't even bother raising his head. He asked, let me guess, you lost 10 games in a row. Wu Yuyan remained unreconciled. How much older is Shen Dege than I am? Wait for me to grow up a few more years. I will definitely beat him. Shen Haoshi smiled helplessly and said, General, I have your letter from home. Gu Fuzhao stood up at once. Give it to me. In front of the three of them, he opened the letter and began to read it carefully. Hu Ji said, looking at the general's expression, Imperial Physician Lin must be doing fine in the capital. Everything remains the same in the Imperial Palace. He is trying to solve the problem of insufficient provisions and wages. It's all business. Gu Fuzhao turned a page and the corner of his lips rose up. Oh, the little Gu is growing very well. It's already given birth to the second nest. Wu Yoyan asked curiously. Little Gu, what is that? Gu Fuzhao said solemnly. They are the second young lady and the third young master of the general's mansion. Wu Yoyan was dumbfounded. When did the general and Imperial Physician Lin have a baby? Hu Ji smiled and said, I think the general is talking about the Gu being raised by Dr. Lin. Wu Yoyan laughed out loud, and Shen Haoxi couldn't help laughing as well. Wu Yoyan asked, "What about the eldest son of the general's mansion?" "Not the eldest son, but the eldest daughter," Gu Fuzhao said. "She was trampled to death by a servant." They looked at each other at a loss, not knowing what expression to put on their faces. They said, "General, we are sorry for your loss." "Speaking of which, today is the Lantern Festival," Hu Ji recalled. "During the year, it's only during the Lantern Festival that the curfew is lifted in the capital. It's also the busiest day of the year." Hearing what Hu Ji said, Gu Fuzhao's memory of the festive night in the capital emerged in his mind. The city full of lanterns, the Jinshe River as bright as a galaxy of stars, a great beauty lovingly enough to cause the face of a city, and a lantern shaped in the shape of a rabbit. Gu Fuzhao smiled to himself. He patted Wu Yoyan on the shoulder and said, "Brothers, you have done a good job. Finish your sparring early and go to an inn." It took more than half a year, but Gu Fuzhao led the soldiers to recover several cities adjacent to Yongliang. In the autumn of the second year of Chu Shi, the Dayu's army was ready for action, setting their sights on the last city, Yongliang.